Alrighty, folks, welcome back to our next episode of SDYT, the podcast, where values still hold value. We're talking about a few different topics with a few different guests and even some personalities about realistic perspectives in building resiliency, finance, fitness, mental, and spiritual health. As always, if you want to contribute material or join us on an episode, email survivaldadyt@gmail.com or message on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Now, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for stopping in. And if you're returning, welcome back. Thank you for hanging out with us for a little bit. To everyone watching the podcast, subscribe, ring the bell. That way you get notifications every time a new episode comes out. I'm really glad you guys stopped by. So, let's cover our next episode. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to SDYT, the podcast. I'm Porter, I'm your host. We got a special episode coming out today. This is now the end of January. We're about 30 days into the new year. And coincidentally enough, within about 30 days to the end of 2021, Geekster the Super Nerd out of Mississippi released a new album called Final Fight. He and I had a bit of a discussion about different values, different perspectives, all sorts of original content. This guy's an artist, folks. I'm telling you, this is going to be an awesome conversation. Here in January, though, we're going to close out our core values for the month. We're talking ambition, perseverance, and reflection. But as we're talking with Geekster, we're going to add in loyalty and respect as well. This is such a cool topic. I can't wait to hear about this, his artistry, his mindset, his perspective. We're going to talk about over the last 12 years now of his career, see how things have evolved for him, and how everything's come together for him in the future. So, without further ado, guys, thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the show, and if you're a returning listener, welcome back. I'm Porter, I'm your host, and this is SDYT, the podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to SDYT, the podcast. Again, I'm Porter, I'm your host. I'm here with Geekster, the Super Nerd, and we've got so much cool stuff to talk about. His new album, Final Fight, finding your passion, your identity, a mix of different emotions and regrets and reflections, all about ambition and artists he's collaborated with. This is a pretty loaded episode. I'm pretty excited. So we'll break this down maybe, let's say past, present, and future. We'll do a couple different segments in this. First off, though, let's get down to it. Geekster, what's going on, man? How's your day?
It's going good for the most part. I was able to get my coffee, so that caffeine is just what I needed to be able to get my day started.
Yeah, perfect. And just for the record, you're what, an hour, 2 hours behind East Coast?
Absolutely. It's 12:17 in my time, Central Standard Time.
Oh, yeah, okay. So you're an hour behind me then. Well, I appreciate you taking your morning to, or I guess lunchtime, to talk a little bit.
Absolutely.
First off, though, congratulations. You got your new album out, Final Fight. That's got to be exciting, huh?
Yes, very, very. It was a long time coming, too.
Yeah, I think I saw it took something like 10 years to get it together and get into headspace.
It did because, a lot of people don't know is that was actually the first project I ever started working on. But it took so long because I had so many things in my personal life going on. But I kind of figured since I already released an EP called Artified, I might as well follow it up with that project, and that was a good move. I was able to take some personal issues and put them in that mixtape, and I say it was a good thing that I did too, because a lot of people gravitated towards it.
Yeah, now I saw you had Death Star also, but that was also in 2021, or when did that come out?
Oh, yeah, that was 2021. I released 3 projects last year.
That's a busy year.
Yup. Death Star came in July the 22nd, I think. Artified came September 25th. And Final Fight was released December 2nd of last year. All last year. Man,
that is busy. But I imagine it was a good outlet for you after being stuck inside for the last year and a half, huh? 2 years, maybe?
Yes, because the pandemic has been... It slowed up, a lot of business things, and things like that down. A lot of people, especially in my community, they don't come out unless they have to work or anything like that. You hardly see anybody out now.
That's kind of the same here. I mean, there's some people that come and go for necessities, you know, groceries and gas, that kind of thing. But things certainly aren't like they were, where people are hanging out or relaxing or going out or just crowds of people, whatever.
Absolutely. It's not as lively as it was, previously.
Yeah,
It
lively is a
really
good
isn't.
word for it. Speaking of lively, I'm curious. Three projects in 2021, but you started what 2012, 2014, sort of putting pen on paper and adding some music to lyrics, or what?
Well, when I I'll say this, like I didn't begin my journey until I turned I'd say 14. After because it was easy to for the transition. And what I mean by that is I was a big fan of poetry before I even started music.
Okay.
So when I realized I wanted to pursue music, I actually took the poetry and turned it into lyrics. And um, I'll say that's how everything started. And here we are, writing awesome music, sticking to the topic and things like that. And it took a lot of work. It would, you know,
Now,
but
isn't
it was worth all the effort.
oh, I mean clearly, sure. Now, isn't that sort of the inception of rap, right? Like just basically poetry to rhythm, or I guess rhythm and poetry.
Yep, rhythm and poetry. That's all it is.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like it's a perfect fit. I think it's such a cool outlet. You know, like obviously you've got loads of creativity that you're putting out there, but it's one thing to tie it to relevant real world topics. It's another to take those lyrics and your creativity and your ambition and tie that to real world topics that also reflect hobbies of yours like video games or passions of yours like older
Yes,
school,
sir.
older generation type video games. Well, like Final Fight, for example, that is a video game. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
now we're talking like 2D type video games, right?
Yep, the retro classic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because you're not going to find them too much anymore. But what brought on that sort of passion? I guess how do you take those sort of hobbies and cultivate them into your own identity? You know what worked for you? What was your process?
Well, um, I I think the biggest part of that is being true to who and what I was, and you know, it's a lot of people. What I've noticed is that as artists, they they speak on things that they're familiar with. They speak on things that's second nature to them, which is very understandable.
Sure.
And with me, I want to do the same thing. So things that are second nature to me is my hobbies on reading, taking in knowledge, comic books, anime, science fiction, video games. I could be able to sit down and have a conversation and really explain what's going on in all of that in simplest terms. But I feel what I wanted to do was take that same energy and implement that in my music and in a manner to where not only could people understand what I'm talking about, but they could be able to understand, how that correlates with my everyday life.
Sure. Yeah, it's ties like that that make things relatable, and I think it's that relatability or that relation that makes audiences empathize with an artist too, musician or otherwise, but as an artist in general.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. And now, matter of fact, when we're talking about retro style video games, uh, Cody Travers basically is the lead character in Final Fight, right?
Absolutely. The main protagonist.
Protagonist, yeah. So now, as he's going through different levels and turmoil and just thugs and gangs, really, and going through the gameplay. Well, let me back up. For anybody listening, Cody Travers is also a one of the songs, one of your more popular songs, as I understand it, actually on Final Fight as well, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And this one isn't even just you. This was a collaboration, I think.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
Plain Jane, I believe, and
Yes,
yourself.
sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
what? How does Cody Travers come together as a track based on the video game, but to your earlier point, as it relates to you in your life? What's the nexus there for that song?
That's an interesting question. I'm glad that you asked that. Now, when I first decided that I was, the moment I realized I want to do the project Final Fight, Cody Travers was actually the very first person that came to mind. And the reason why I made it a necessity to put him, to make a song for him, not just because he was the main protagonist, but because I could relate to him. You know, going through situations, he has to battle gangs, crooked policemen, the city itself in order to be able to save and protect his girlfriend, Jessica. And I can relate to that because I'm not saying I have to go through, physically protect my fiance, but I could understand what it means and what he went and why what he had to go through to protect her. Because I would do the same thing for my fiance. And along with that, like throughout that whole video game, all he did was fight. If it wasn't one person he had to beat up, it was another person. And I could relate to that because it seemed like there's always something I had to battle.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was mental health issues, on the rest of occasions, physical interaction and confrontation, things like that. And, sometimes I had to battle myself, my insecurities, my doubts. So it was very easy to implement all of that and put that into the song Cody Travers.
Well, now that you break it down, it sounds a lot simpler to tie into a protagonist like that. Because otherwise, it's not like you're, going after low-hanging fruit and talking about, what it's like if you were a cartoon character or if you are, an animated character, or what it would be like if you were in this game with forearms as big as your quads, So, for one, I'm glad that there's a lot of aspects of these songs that actually have depth. I think now, at least in my opinion, there's a lot of music that's coming out that doesn't. It reflects what the artist observes or what they're physically going through, or it's like COVID-related songs and movies. Like, okay, sure, it's another virus or another zombie thing or another whatever, but you're not another artist. Like, you've got depth, you've got relatability, you've got exposure to topics that, whether people think about it or not, everybody else experiences as well. But you're tying it to something that people enjoy, like video games, which people can tie to nostalgia, they can tie to their families, they can tie to a passion or an upbringing or a perspective. And then coming from Mississippi, coming from, I think you were in a competition last year, weren't you?
Yes, sir. Well, not like a competition, but yeah, it was. It was the Hood Idol Showcase.
That's right. Lex Luga hosted, I believe, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. Get a little bit more into your personal life, I suppose. What was this about? What was the competition about?
Oh, wow. In order to tell that story, I would have to go back. I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I to my first attendance of the Hood Idol tour. I was walking past a little sports bar, and my cousin stopped me. Well, one of my cousins stopped me and said, "Cuz, they having a showcase in there." And I'm like, "What do you mean? They're having a showcase? Artists and singers are able to perform. You have music, so why don't you perform?" I mean, before I knew it, I was running to my house, had to change clothes, and they told me I had to pay $25 to perform. So, and that's all I had was $25. So I went there, got the money, came back, and they asked me, "You're like, who are you?" I said, "My name is Geekster the Super Nerd."
Yeah.
They looked at each other and they kind of laughed a little bit because down here, I would say, in a lot of parts of Mississippi, people still believe in their stereotype to where nerds and geeks are really the underdogs of society, to where we don't have any significant value. We're still creepy. All we do is read books and stuff like that. We don't really have a personal life outside of scholastic and academic goals. So I met Luga, and Luga, I told him my name. He said, "Okay, that's what's up." Like when it came to be my turn to perform, he said my name, and the people in the crowd, they were laughing because of the name. All of that changed when I performed. When I performed, everybody in that crowd was quiet. it was so quiet that I heard the toilet flush in the back of the building. So what was so funny about it is not only were they quiet, but I won second place.
There you go.
With second place in the Hood Idol tour, you get the song that you perform placed on their mixtape.
Oh wow.
So Luga actually stopped me and he said that your music is good, but it's also marketable because in that whole song you did absolutely no cursing, no profanity whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I performed 2 more times and I still got the same response. I had people that would stop me and say, if you keep going, you'll make it. So I got the reassurance I needed, and it showed me that even though I wasn't getting a lot of support in my hometown, because it's generally a crab bucket. It's a crab bucket, to sum it all up. So I would say that sometimes you have to step outside of where you live to realize that you don't have to necessarily get support from your peers in order to be able to get that recognition and that respect you deserve. People in other countries, other states, they'll support you quicker than people that have known you your entire life.
Sometimes that's definitely the case. There's I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. I think it was Napoleon Hill. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So among a few other things for anybody listening, Napoleon Hill is an author, or I guess was an author, and he wrote a book, for example, called Think and Grow Rich. But he also said, I may be misquoting here a little bit, but he also said basically that some of the people with the greatest potential that have failed throughout history have been because they've relied on the advice of their friends and family. And I think that ties a lot into what you're saying here, where you've got to be, it's sort of a cosmic truth, I think, that you've got to learn to be uncomfortable in different circumstances and settings to be able to grow. If you just stick to your family, your friends, your safety net, your support group, your security blanket, you're never really going to reach as far as you could based on your potential and your ambition. And I think it shows a lot with your music and what you're capable of so far as well. Even based on this story here where you had to sort of build support from complete strangers. But that's what gave you the drive to be able to push further.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, while we're talking about that, actually, you had mentioned when you were describing the Hood Idol tour, you had talked about geeks and nerds as the underdogs of society.
Yes, sir.
Let's jump on that a little bit. Your name, for one, as an artist, your identity is basically self-proclaimed, I suppose, but a geek with an affinity for nerdcore hip-hop. What are these terms? They're not something you put together every day. So let's break them down a little bit. How do you define being a geek? How'd you come up with your name? How does all this come together? Is your identity as an artist or as an individual? What do you got?
I would be happy to answer that. Now, this goes back to, I would have to say I had to be like 19 years old. I had a mentor who was the brother of one of my closest friends who passed away a few years back. His name is Deverick Haywood, but his stage name was Big Stacks. So he heard that I was recording music. He offered to take me under his wing. Mm-hmm. So I recorded one song with him, and he was already impressed. He could see the hunger and the drive I had. So the next weekend, I went over to his house. He said, we're going to record, but before we do, you have to come up with a stage name for yourself. I must have sat down for like 10 whole minutes brainstorming what I could call myself. Yeah. Because I was so focused on the music, I never thought about the name.
Well, it's like that moment in Spider-Man when Tobey Maguire's behind the wrestling curtain before he goes out,
Yes. And then I still thought about that because I was like, I want to come up with something cool because I don't want to be like that because Tobey Maguire talked to the announcer. He said, what's your name? He said, the Human Spider. He said, oh, that sucks. I want to be in that position.
Yeah.
So I told Big Stacks, I said, what about the geeky one? He said, no, Geekster. And it stuck But then I felt like it was too ordinary for what I was.
Sure.
And the reason why I say that is because I felt I was the best of both worlds, a geek and a nerd. And to be able to explain why I felt that way, a geek is defined, well, a nerd is defined as somebody who understands and collects complicated and cool stuff.
Okay.
A geek is an individual that can be able to not only know and collect cool stuff, but it's also able to fix these things. So I saw a lot of issues with music. Like the music lacked authenticity that I was listening to. It lacked heart. It lacked conviction. So I would say a year after I started recording with him, and I started recording with Big Stacks because he had some personal issues going on. He had to take care of first.
Mm-hmm.
But a year after that happened, I decided to call myself Geekster the Super Nerd because I didn't think anything was ordinary about me. I didn't, as a nerd, nothing was ordinary about me because I felt that a regular nerd knows that they're a nerd, but a super nerd is an individual that not only knows what they are, but they also embrace it. So I felt like that fit me perfectly. So I say, the next time I saw Stacks after that, when I told him my name, he said, "No matter what happens, stick with it.
Yeah.
And it's been a wrap ever since.
I like it. I think there's a certain amount of strength when you are able to identify who you are and what you stand for. But like even on our podcast here this year, our theme is the character of your character, where it doesn't necessarily have to be a fictional character, but who you are and what you embody as a value system and how you're able to communicate that and what you stand for and what you want to convey to other people about that image, about that identity. I think it's a lot easier to be genuine because you know who you are. You know what you stand for. It's a lot easier to build everything. Respect for yourself, convey that in your music, in your art. For that matter, balance out you as an artist, you as a physical person, you as a digital person, you as a father, right? You as a fiance, you as a person. Like you can not necessarily compartmentalize, but by building self-respect and building your self-identity and then building consistency with it, I think it helps process. You mentioned mental health issues before, and we'll get into more of that here shortly, probably in the next segment. But one of the things I think that stuck to me when you mentioned that is processing mental health issues. And this isn't deformities and retardations and crazy extreme cases like this. This is just dealing with stresses and how you resolve conflict and how you view the world as mental health in this capacity. But I think what's cool about it, man, is you were able to take your identity, cultivate it into something that's easier for you to process in a way that you like to process based on video games, based on hobbies, based on your perspective of the world, and then turn that into something and somebody and an image that you as a person can relate to. And so you can sort out your own, mental issues as you go. That's got to be a powerful feeling too.
Yes, sir. It really is. There's no feeling like it.
So I guess then if that's the case, let's roll into Final Fight then on that note, where I feel like, and tell me if I'm missing the mark, I feel like a big theme of that album was recognizing your emotions and identifying yourself and your ambition and sort of flashbacks on decisions you could have made or done differently. Am I close? What's the theme of the album? What's it really about?
Well, you actually got everything you said that was implemented in that project. Self-reflection, decisions that I should have made, but I went against my better judgment.
Uh-huh.
The whole thesis of Final Fight, and what a lot of people didn't know, is that was going to be my last project.
Ever.
And the reason why, because I would say throughout the years of me pursuing a career, I found myself getting discouraged because Here I am. It's hard to get a job, and not saying that I can't work a job. It's just that the jobs that are here now, the only way you can be able to get employed is if you pass the assessment test.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter if it says urgent hiring or hiring on the spot. If you can't pass that assessment test, you don't get the job.
Mm-hmm.
With me, that was one of the things that held me back, so I had to do odd jobs and stuff like that. And it been situations to where I wouldn't make enough money to be able to buy the instrumentals that I use now. Like, I started off, downloading instrumentals off YouTube and rapping on them. Because all I could really afford was money for studio time. But it discouraged me because my peers and people that were around me, they had enough money to literally buy instrumentals and then pay for the studio time as well. Music videos, they were doing all that, and I felt like I was a snail in a race with a rabbit.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing the progress. It's gradual, but compared to what everybody else was doing, I felt like I was making no progress at all. So I had it made up in my mind that, in case things went south, Final Fight was going to be my last project. It was going to be, saying goodbye to, my attempts of setting foot into the industry.
Sure.
So it was basically, based off how I felt off the video game. When you think about the word final, you think last, like
it's,
one more
it's
time.
The boss level. That's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So, like, if this really was a video game, like the life I was living, the life I am living, I would definitely say I was at that last stage with the last boss battle.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? And I had no idea if I was going to be able to beat the boss, but just in case if I wasn't able to, I wanted to leave a mark that said, hey, I was here and I was trying to get my foot in the door.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Now there's actually 2 tracks on the album. I guess let's touch on those real quick too. Where we mentioned your collaboration on Cody Travers with I'm Plain Jane before, but you did another one on there as well called Born to Fly, right?
Oh yeah. Born to Fly is definitely, it's one of the first songs you listen to as you dig deeper into the project.
Yeah, I think it's the 3rd or 4th track on there if I remember right. But
I think the 3rd one. Yes,
what's the inception for this track? What's behind it?
Well, I wrote that song when I was 21 years old, and when I was at that age, me and my mom, we argued on a constant basis, and I would say during that time something told me to record the conversation, and we did. And I did. So I'm discouraged because she said some things that, she hit below the belt. I think it's best to just say it that way.
Sure.
So I left. I walked outside the house. I sat on the steps, and in our, we had like a big yard, and a mockingbird just came out of nowhere, just landed on the ground, and I looked at the bird, and the bird made eye contact with me, and it tilted his head. I don't know, maybe I could just be tripping, but the bird was like, what are you doing? Like, really, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it just blew away. And all I know is I started crying when I saw that, because I had the mentality to where I felt like a lot of stuff wasn't going the way I felt it should in life. 21 years old, still living with my mom, and I was at the point to where, as I saw the bird fly, I said, if I had wings, I would definitely be right behind you, So
I see.
I thought of the song Born to Fly. And I always thought of myself as a phoenix, a legendary bird. No matter what's done to it, it can always rise from the ashes, no matter what it goes through. But for some strange reason, it was still a pile of ashes inside of a volcano. So it's destined for greatness, but it's still stuck in that same spot. It's trying to, deep down, it's trying to figure out how it can be able to reach that level, be able to be reborn, and be able to have everything it needs to go from point A to point B.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, Phoenix with broken wings, I think you said.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah. Some of those lyrics are pretty powerful, actually. It was good. It was good. I think you did both of you. I think you did a great job on that song. There's something to be said for that second wind. I think that realization, right? Like what I think about this sometimes. What's the difference or the moment in time? Why is the moment different when everything's going well or everything's going whatever your normal version of normal is, compared to the moment when emotionally you're broke down, ready to quit, ready to give up, and it's something small like that bird didn't tell you anything. The bird didn't intentionally do anything at all. He was doing bird things on a bird day. But for you to interpret just that small twitch of his head when you were in that level of duress emotionally, trying to process life and angst and stressors and everything else, I wonder what it is about those moments that makes things that much more powerful, that now it's blown up into an entire 5 minutes of your career for collaborations and music and its own standalone single,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, somewhere in the world there is a bird who is not going to be getting any of your royalties, and I think it's a disservice.
Oh.
Man. And now you did another song on your album that we can tie back into here shortly, called More Than a Game. I think you did this with, I don't remember, the Illest Gamer, I think.
Illest Gamer?
Yeah,
Yes,
Illest Gamer and Game Notes, yep. I had to listen to this one a couple times because I didn't process in my head how best to put this into words, but what I like about that song, and I believe the tie between these two, Born to Fly and More Than a Game, is ambition. And
yes, sir.
And to a lot of different perspectives, ambition and drive and motivation and inspiration are all sort of synonymous. But I think ambition is a little bit more in that moment, emotional duress and stress and not really rock bottom or victimization, but those moments where you get a second wind. Ambition is what gives you traction to get out of the mud hole. It's what gets you moving.
Yes,
and that's a powerful thing. And am I off the mark? Is that what More Than a Game is about? What's the direction there?
It was definitely ambition. It was the drive to move forward. Because I would say that I would say like when I did the song Out of the Way and then More Than a Game, I already had my mind made up that I was going to keep going. Mm-hmm. So it was amazing that, physically, in real life, I underwent a transition from wanting to give up in this industry to, continuing. It also reflected in that project. And with More Than a Game, I realized that it was going to take a lot more. And I realized that it's the design of the universe that some people just have to work a little bit harder than others.
Sure.
And when I realized that, I said, well, if I have a lot more work to do, then let me just keep going. So with More Than a Game, I focused on a lot of stuff that was important to me. The things that made me happy, the people that depended on me, the things I needed to do in order to keep that momentum going as far as financial dependency, as far as my career. I took all of that and I put it in that song. And I think it came out pretty well. I think it did too. I think it did.
I'd say so. I haven't brought that up to you in any conversations we've had before until just now. And if I'm that close to what you intended to come across, then I guess you did it very well. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
That alone has to count for something. But before we jump into some more stuff, let's take a quick break for a couple minutes, and then we'll be back here on SDYT the podcast. Again, we're talking to Geekster the Super Nerd, and we'll go over a little bit more in depth. We'll tie our next segment, I think, more into the present and get out of the past a little bit. But for the time being, I'm Porter. I'm your host, and guys, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Geekster, sit tight, bud.
Yes, sir.
Hey, everybody. This is Porter with SDYT, the podcast. When we're talking about spending time with your family and even remembering loved ones, maybe when you can't be there. I'd like to pass the mic for a second over to my buddy Dax, and he's going to talk about the Bee and the Bear Creations. That's B-E-E and the B-E-A-R. Bee and the Bear Creations. Dax?
Hey everyone, it's Dax here. I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to my wife Julie. She is a artist of sorts, but she has a Facebook page called The Bee and the Bear Creations. And what that page is for is basically if you wanted to do a specialized item like a tumbler or a hat or a vinyl or a decal or a shirt, you can go there, you can ask some questions, look through the wares, but then give a DM and try to sort it out, and then work and adjust pricing. But if you're interested in something like that, go ahead, like her page. It's the Bee and the Bear Creations on Facebook. So go enjoy.
Alrighty, folks, welcome back to SDYT, the podcast. I'm Porter. I'm your host, and again, we're talking with Geekster, the super nerd. We covered so much cool stuff in that first part. Geekster, I'm going to call you Geek. Is that cool, man? Can I call you Geek?
Absolutely.
All right. Geek, I really appreciate you coming in, man. One of the things that we touched on in the last segment was one of the tracks from Final Fight called More Than a Game. This collaboration that you had with the Illest Gamer and Game Notes, talking about ambition and drive and sort of balancing out your expectations and your ambition with the constraints of reality in the moment, in the present, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So one of the things I want to ask you about, just as a person, not necessarily as an artist, depending on how you want to take this, it's up to you. But
sure, yes, sir.
But there's got to be a balance, but in this sort of, I guess, rat race of chasing your dreams and keeping up with reality, right? How do you, in your perspective, your values, your style, balance that out in your career and hobbies? What do you do?
Well, I would always have to say that having my priorities in order played a major role in that, because I've noticed that there are a lot of artists, a lot of people in general, that they'll put their passion before everything.
Sure.
They'll put it first, and they'll put their passion before their friends, their family, their loved ones, and things like that. And I noticed that things couldn't help but go downhill for them, But I think that with me, I was always instilled to be able to know what's truly important and to be able to know when to put that first. And when you know how to put priorities in order, it seems like life itself falls into place. Because I would say that during the last year, ever since March, because that's when I started recording on the projects, I had to maintain that mentality of recording and releasing these projects, but also making sure that my fiance and our daughter were okay. So the first thing I did was I told my fiance, hey, I know that I've been working this job since 2019, but, I realize now that I have a job, I have no excuse not to release any music. So this whole year, I'm going to be releasing 3 projects, and I need you to be cool with it. And she was. Every Thursday, I will always send her the money she would ask for. And that's what I love about my fiance. She's not hard to please. Very reasonable as long as you come to her honestly.
Yeah.
So when I told her how much the instrumentals would cost, how much the studio time would cost, she said, well, just send me such and such money. And the way that worked out is not only will I have enough money to be able to, invest in my hobbies, but I will also have enough money left to be able to be there for her and our daughter, stuff like that. So I think that just shows that when you when you put the most important things first, everything else falls into place. So, and thank goodness for that, because I felt like it was a long time, but I feel like it worked out well, because there were times to where I would have a studio session scheduled for that day. I would tell her about the session, but stuff happened with our daughter and things like that, and with her that was serious. I put that first. And for some strange reason, when I did, I would have to let the engineer know, or the producer know, hey, this came up, I had like some family issues I had to take care of. Mm-hmm. Is there any way I can pay or buy this instrumental on another time? And to my surprise, they said, no, just come on. I'll send you the instrumental, or you can come and take out the studio session. Just pay me the moment you get paid.
Yeah.
And it worked out. So none of that would have been able to take place unless I knew what was important and I took care of that first.
There is no replacement for loyalty, whether it's to yourself, to your dreams, to your family, to your priorities, whatever. But I agree, you got to be honest. Like you were talking about with your fiance, you got to be honest first to identify how to prioritize and what your priorities are. And then dedication and loyalty to them. It goes a long way, man. Yeah, I totally understand, for sure. There's a spot in Final Fight. It's dialogue. It's recorded dialogue in Final Fight. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's in more than a game.
Yes,
if I had to guess, it sounds like the same lady in the recording from Born to Fly in the intro. So I'm assuming it's your mother. I don't know. But she says, the world doesn't revolve around me like the world doesn't revolve around you.
That's my mom. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, I agree with her. That's true. It doesn't. But,
yes, sir.
But I think there's a balance there, because you can't chase what you want, your dreams, and make it a priority without sacrificing to a certain degree the fact that the world does in fact need to sometimes revolve around you and your schedule to make these dreams realities, right? So how do you balance out your attention span, or need for time, or need for money, or need for attention? Like you can't sacrifice for everybody else all the time. How do you prioritize that better?
Well, I would have to say that, and I would have to be honest with myself yet again. I've always been a giving person. I will not lie. I've always been the kind of person to where if I have it and a person within my circle of friends or family or associates needed it, it was theirs automatically. Mm-hmm. But I've also had to realize that I have to put myself first sometimes.
Sure.
So, and it has to be a balance, and I feel like I had to, and sometimes it can be complicated. It can be tricky, because it takes time to understand when to put yourself first and when to make other people a priority, because the same way you can't always make other people first, you can't always make yourself first. So the line between that can be blurry sometimes. But I trust my instincts. I really think about, do I really need to do this for myself first? And I outweigh the pros and cons of doing that. And I would say it's worked out. I would say it has, because I think it also involves your instincts too.
What do you mean?
Being able to really just make sound decisions and things like that.
I think a lot of that comes from upbringing and perspective, though, to make sound decisions and really just respect other people as a priority.
Yes, sir.
But I think that comes as you grow up. You sort of mature with your surroundings over time. Hopefully, you mature with your surroundings over time. And I think a lot of that's apparent in your music too. But as an artist, in developing your style, we talked about it a little bit. Basically 2012, 2014, up to 2020 in the past. But in the present, how do you consistently develop you and your perspective? How do you decide what to let in and what to internalize, and how do you inspire yourself now to do new projects and keep pushing?
Well, I can say on a music aspect, a lot of that plays a big deal with me remaining true to who I am. Like, and it's amazing because I could be, watching YouTube about a video game, and out of nowhere, I'd be like, hey, I can make a mixtape out of that or an album out of it, and it happens by itself. Like, it's not something I planned or something I forced. Like, I've learned to go with the flow and just trust the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the whole reason why I was able to release 3 projects in such a short period of time last year. So I would say if I stay true to who I am and doing the things I enjoy, I'm able to incorporate all of that into music because I'm watching anime, coming up with music projects based off that. Video games. I even thought of a comic book. A project based off a comic book that I read when I was growing up. So I feel like if you incorporate what you love into music and stuff like that, it shows. And I think that's one of the things that always keeps me busy, always keeps me filled with inspiration, because I know that the things that I love and I enjoy will never die out. Like, I think, maybe 10 years from now, after I pass away, they'll still be coming up with video games. I wouldn't be surprised if they were still making sequels to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat after I die. I would not be surprised by that.
Yeah. Well, that's like, what was it? Mortal Kombat Legacy, I think, a couple years ago. It was going to be a live action.
Yes,
you remember that?
I remember that. Yes, sir.
Whatever happened with that? I didn't even see if that ended or came to.
I don't think it came out. I think what they did was, no, they didn't. I think it did come out.
I don't know. I remember seeing clips on YouTube,
like,
and then it just wasn't. It just stopped as far as I saw it.
I think they did release it. I'm not sure. I have to go back because the only one that I know about was Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge. And
okay.
I think,
well, that one was animated though, right?
It was animated. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Legacy was all live action. And they...
Oh, no. Oh, I remember what you were talking about. No, what they, you have people that do a lot of false advertising. And you have people that they'll do stuff like that to get hype, and they'll do that to get followers and subscribers and comments on YouTube and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was confirmed that wasn't going to be a real thing. A lot of people were disappointed by that.
Yeah, that's a letdown. That would have been pretty cool.
It really would have.
All right, let me ask you this. While we're talking about Mortal Kombat, what do you think about a Scorpion-themed album?
Believe it or not, I have a Scorpion-themed song on SoundCloud.
What's it called?
The Wrath of Hanzo Hasashi.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, sure. But this is before he became Scorpion, I assume? Or like Mortal Kombat Scorpion?
It is. Now, it has 3 verses. The first verse explains how it is he became Scorpion. The second verse explains how it is he grew to despise Sub-Zero and stuff like that. And the third verse explains how it is he killed Scorpion. He does. I'm Sub-Zero, but he does not have his closure until he finds out that Quan Chi was the one that killed his family, and he kills Quan Chi.
That's a heavy song.
Oh yeah, it is. A lot of people were surprised I was able to make that song and stick to it.
Yeah, that's a lot to put into one song too.
It was. I had a headache writing that whole song because there was so much to talk about.
Yeah, man. That I love your creativity, man. I think it's really cool how you're pulling in these different influences that you're already passionate about into a different outlet that you're also passionate about, and then it comes through. You know, it's genuine, but it's fun. It's not super real and down to earth, where it's almost specifically unrelatable because there aren't people that are living your life, but you and your neighbors and your friends and your social circles. But it's specific enough to where people can relate. I think it's such a cool direction that you're taking this. One of the things, speaking of commonalities, that you mentioned earlier, I guess a little bit more on a serious note, you talked about mental health, mindfulness, and one of the things that we've talked about, which now we're going to bring up as well, was you called it bipolar depression. I'm not too familiar with any of this, so if you're cool with it, let's roll that direction, because I'm sure there are listeners out there that can relate to that. So I'm just going to let you take the reins for a little bit while we're talking about mental health and bipolar depression. How does this apply to you? What's your take on this? What's your perspective here?
I would say that it's something that is close to my heart because, once again, like in my neck of the woods, you have individuals that when you hear the word mental health or the term mental health, they automatically come to the conclusion that you need to be institutionalized. You need to be put somewhere. You need to be put on a social security check.
Sure.
And that prevents a lot of people that I know that needs, treatment of some kind for mental health. It prevents them from going to get it because of the stereotype and how that spread around town and stuff like that. So I would have to say that with me having bipolar depression, it's to the point to where I have very unpredictable mood swings sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it can get to the point to where, with me, I guess the best way to say it is that with me having that kind of depression, I have triggers, a lot of triggers. And I think we all do, but I think the difference between a person that has depression or bipolar depression and a regular human being being triggered is that with someone like me being triggered, our reaction can be extreme sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes to the point to where if we sit back and we think about it, we're like, man, I did not have to react that way. And that causes us to be even more depressed because we get upset about it. We feel like we should have handled that situation different. But
sure.
At the same time, it's like an impulse. It's something that really, I don't want to say it can't be controlled, but it has to be something that you are fully aware of. And when I did, go to get the coping skills I needed, they said that the first step to being able to improve your reaction to a situation like that is realizing when you are angry and when you are about to get angry. And that was easy because one thing I've noticed that when I get angry, my body temperature changes. Like I feel hot when I get angry. So the moment I notice that, I do whatever it takes to calm down, whether it's talk to my dad or talk to my fiance or walk around. I do what it takes to be able to put myself in a better mindset. So I would say that that's helped me out a lot. But it's a lot of people that they don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know how to do that because they're afraid to reach out to that help because they're so afraid of having a label put on them. They're so afraid of losing friends, losing associates. They're trying to save face. A lot of people are. And I always felt that a reputation is worthless when it comes to getting the help that you need. I would rather get the help I need and lose friends that I didn't deserve to have or didn't deserve to have me in their circle than to pretend like everything is okay and be in the company of associates that don't have my best interests at heart.
Sure. Yeah. Now, what role have you found then for, I don't want to just relegate to music. This could be any of your hobbies, whether it's reading or cooking or painting or music or whatever. But what role have you found your hobbies to fill as an outlet for you to mitigate some of your triggers and manage this?
I would say that one thing let me see. I'm trying to word it correctly.
Sure.
I would say that to a lot of people, my music is awesome content, but to me, my music is actually a conduit in which I'm able to channel everything I feel, everything I know, everything I stand on, and everything I believe in. I'm able to transfer all of that into the music. Kind of like Thor. I learned recently that the reason why Thor has that hammer is because on his own he can't control his electric powers. That hammer serves as a conduit that he can be able to channel that excess energy into. So I can relate to that. So when I realized, I said, okay, I'm doing something right. Let me keep this going.
Yeah, man. Music is your Mjolnir, huh?
Yes, sir.
I like that. Maybe that could be another track. That's kind of a catchy title too. But when we're talking about music and mental health, one of the things that I thought was pretty neat about Born to Fly, I'm going to roll back to that track for a second,
Yes, sir.
is the amount of self-love. It wasn't like you specified a social status or a background. It was relatable and generic enough where building hope and ambition, almost regardless of setback, and drive for yourself to better yourself and your circumstances, that level and identification of self-love, I think was pretty apparent in that song. What role did that have? You mentioned as a conduit, but where did that actually come from for you then? How do you let me back up. You explained where that song came from.
Yes, sir.
But how do you relate to, say, that song and that theme of self-love and self-care present in that song? How do you relate to that now? Is it even still applicable?
It's still very relevant because, and it's a lot of self-love because growing up, I had virtually no self-esteem, none whatsoever. And I think I would dare to say that my lack of self-esteem and confidence was embodied in that song because here I am, I'm 21 years old, I still live with my mom. My mom isn't giving me that positive energy to keep going. She's not giving me that energy to, it's not like she's saying, you know what, you got this, keep going, and then on top of that, issues with employment and things like that. And it was a struggle to remain positive or to be able to cultivate the confidence I needed to believe in myself the way I do now. But I would say that 9 years ago, actually 8 years ago, I was 21. So the way I was then is different from how I am now. I would say I have a lot more confidence, a lot more self-esteem. And I would say that the motivating factor behind that is that the relationship I have with my mom, I don't want to have that relationship with my daughter. I don't want her to be in the position to where she's going through something or she comes to me or I see her going through something, and instead of giving her a sense of refreshment mentally and stuff like that, I'm tearing her down, making it seem like it's her fault, like she's messing up. I want to be able to do the opposite of what my mom did with me. So I always remember that song. And that song is actually a daily reminder to be the kind of parent that my mom was to my daughter.
Yeah, I like that. I'm sure you can definitely relate and probably speak to it a lot more in depth than I can. But I think every good protagonist, every good superhero has that moment in their development arc that changes everything and pushes them off to a better direction. And it sounds like that was your catalyst. It sounds like that's a theme that worked well for you. So if that's any indication, I guess, wearing tights is entirely your perspective if you decide to, but at the very least, you're on track to being a pretty legit superhero. So that counts for something.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Yeah, man. Let's take a quick couple minutes. We'll take a break. We'll come back more with Geekster, the super nerd. We'll talk a little bit more about future generations now, confidence, self-esteem, and then your values and how this applies to a future perspective. So I'm pretty excited to jump back in with you, but for the time being, sit tight for a few minutes. Geek, we'll be back in a second, brother.
Yes, sir.
The Patriot Empowerment Institute is is a veteran-operated nonprofit. It seeks to help active duty military members transition into different spheres of the civilian sector. Patriot Empowerment Institute focuses on bringing the best out of transitioning service members through mentorship and detailed planning regarding that member's goals, of course. By using a long-term approach, 2 years prior to EAS, the Patriot Empowerment Institute is able to leverage both time and resources to increase the chances of a successful transition. Please visit patriotempowermentinstitute.com for more information. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to SDYT, the podcast. I'm Porter. I'm your host. You're talking with Geekster, the super nerd. Phenomenal interview so far, man. I really appreciate you having time to sit in here and talk. We've covered all kinds of cool stuff. The past that led up to your present, metaphorically, physically, your artistry, your development as a human, as a character, essentially, now that you're becoming within your albums. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I guess first, before we dive into more of this, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Anytime. Yeah, I had fun.
Yeah. This is pretty cool. For all of the listeners that have come in as this show's been progressing, or if you're just new to the show, welcome. If you're a returning listener, especially if you've been with us throughout this entire episode, welcome back. Let's get back into this. Where we left off on the last segment, Geek, we were talking about future generations and parenting and lessons that you learned about parenting or about life from the relationship you had with your mom and growing up with adult figures to now how you are trying to morph that into a style, your own style, for parenting and role modeling and inspiration for your daughter, right?
Yes, sir.
If we're talking video games, I guess, the character development, the arc that you've used and developed and embodied over now basically 3 decades of consciousness is ridiculous. The shift that you've been able to make, in my opinion, the shift that you've been able to make, from relative turmoil, mental, physical, emotional, whatever, and processing that. And from what you've said, generally speaking, not that you haven't had a support network to fall back on, but the majority of that transition and strength development has been in your head on your own through different outlets. Yes, your music, your paintings, your reading, your interpretation of the world, and that one little bird on that one day, Like,
yes, sir.
that's crazy. There's a lot of inner strength, I think, that it takes to be able to make a transition like that. So, for one, I guess, just my opinion and sort of advice to you, don't sell yourself short.
Yes, sir.
But
yes, sir.
One of the things that you touched on in the last segment, I guess, essentially is Thor channeling this electricity into, well, I don't know, whatever you can do with electricity and a hammer, that he would do. This Mjolnir is a mindset concept, man. I think it's so cool that you're using music and artistry to find your style, identify yourself, your strengths, embody this new character for your daughter and for your family, and channel these emotions and these mindsets into this outlet for them and then for the future you. So I guess we're talking future generations, whether it's your daughter, whether it's other people's kids or their grandkids or just you in the future. Well, we're talking future generations. What's your direction, Geek? What are you doing? What are you planning, man? How do you see your character development arc changing?
I can definitely say it's a surprise to me because it's so very unpredictable. I can say that with me going with the flow, even though it leads me to going in different directions, somehow, in a weird sense, I stay on track because I focus on music, but now I've started to focus on other things that could be able to help me out. But somehow, no matter what I do, it always correlates with the music, with my family, with my personal life. So to tell you the truth, it's really no telling, honestly. It surprises me sometimes. I won't even lie.
Okay. All right. Well, what kind of plans do you already have in the works then? Let's try that direction. Or do you?
Well, I have some plans. I would say as of now, I've talked to a couple of people. I would say sometime in the near future, I won't say when, I will be having a booking agent, so I can be able to showcase my music, perform, really being able to expand my brand. So,
Sure.
I can be able to reach more people, especially other individuals like me, specifically the younger generation. I would say that's the primary target at this point.
What do you mean younger generation? Because to every 80-year-old, there's younger generations. What do you mean?
Well, I guess what I would say is that when I say the younger generation, I say like people that used to be, I mean, that are now 10 years old up to maybe 16 or 17.
I see where
Right?
you were.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you. Yeah, I've got a son now. He's 7, and there's a lot of things that he does and how he sees the world that have inspired me in the way I see it now differently than before he existed.
Yes, sir.
And it's
Yes,
little
sir.
things usually. It's little things usually. Like, um, for example, we were driving the other day, and he was looking out the
Yes.
window, and we passed 2 things on that drive that he made comments about that stuck with me. The first, there was a guy standing on the corner of the road with a cardboard sign, like "We'll work for food, God bless" type sign,
Yeah.
handwritten
Yes, sir.
cardboard, piece of cardboard. And my son looked out the window. Windows are up, right? My son looked out the window. He looked back at me, and he said, "Daddy, why does that man have a sign? Not why did he write that? Why is that guy here? Why whatever? But why does he have a sign?" And I was like, I didn't know how to answer it. Like, he's trying to get a message to people. He's trying to communicate. He's trying to get money. He's trying to get food. Like, none of it felt like a satisfactory answer, right? So I copped out, and I was, because he's trying to communicate with people who are driving and their windows are up. It was a cop-out answer, but it got me thinking in the moment, and really since then, how do you describe to somebody that you want to communicate so bad you're willing to put it on a piece of trash and hope somebody looks at it? Like you can't find a way, any other way. You can't find any other way. A wave, a handshake, a hug, something physical, an email, a video call, a phone call, something verbal. Like, you can't find any other way to communicate, at least that you could think of, other than I'm going to pick up this trash and just hope somebody responds. Like, that level of acceptance for futility, and I'm not saying this all applies. I think there are plenty of
Right.
people that fake being homeless to get money, unfortunately, or fake
Absolutely.
circumstances, but we're applying this principle here to legitimacy. So to have that level of acceptance of futility, if that applies, that emotional bottom,
Yes, sir.
that was one of the moments to me that resonated when I was listening to Born to Fly and More Than a Game and different tracks like Cody Travers, for example, on Final Fight. And that was one of the things that drew me into your album. But the second moment, for relatability, I guess, the second moment, though,
Yes, sir.
on that drive that stuck out to me, my son brought up this, I assume, homeless guy with the sign there as we drove past him. And then he asked me a little bit later in the drive, he said, "Daddy, why don't you do that?" Now, that answer, again, I gave him a pretty standard because I don't want to. I don't need to.
Right.
Like it was easy enough, but on some sort of deeper level, for whatever inspirational reason, hit me was, why don't I try to communicate with people out of some sort of desperation? I don't actually know what that's like. That emotional level of depravity, I guess. I don't know. I don't have any way to experience it or to relate with people on that level. But the flip side is, and I have no way of knowing, I didn't count, but the flip side is, how many people actually live that way every day? Whether they're homeless or not, or just having life issues and stressors that they're trying to work through, or communicate from a point of depression, for example, or suicidal thoughts, or sociopathic thoughts. Like, the level of frustration to a certain degree to communicate with people about topics and from a perspective where you as the speaker feel like nobody else understands where I'm coming from. I can't communicate with anybody. You know, I don't know what that's like, in part because I've never actually internalized that throughout my life and never really thought about it. Um, but luckily, I haven't needed to. Interestingly enough, the dialogue intro, the argument between you and your mom in Born to Fly, when I heard that, that second moment is exactly where I went back to, because that's exactly what you told your mom. You were saying that you didn't know how to relate to her, you didn't know how to communicate with her, and she sort of threw her hands up and was like, "Well, then I can't help you either." You know, it's
Yeah, pretty much. That's how that conversation went too.
that's such a crazy, powerful moment, man. Having that level of relatability with other people, it's such a powerful and unique position, because regardless of how many people actually feel that way, I don't know that there are as many people who have identified how to communicate from that perspective. And you have that ability. You have that superpower, man. It's so cool hearing how your music's developed. Death Star was a little bit more political, well, a lot more political than Final Fight, but as a general theme. And so hearing the two together, how your perspective changed, and from what you said, actually, how your perspective changed just between July and December of 2021 when those two came out is crazy. And to me, it's a 6-month difference. To you, I assume it's a lifetime of perspective changes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So moving forward, I understand it's difficult to try to guess or forecast how your perspective is going to change. But what are some, I guess, new influences on the horizon, or old influences you intend to look at differently? Social media, movies, music, comics, whatever. But like, where's your perspective taking you next?
It's two things, and they're both from the past. One I would definitely say was Spider-Man, the comic book, and I always try to keep that in mind for future references, so I can be able to also let people know where my drive came from. I didn't come across Spider-Man until I was like 9 or 10 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and when I remember I was going in my room and one of my older brothers was watching Spider-Man the animated series,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm seeing this guy in a red and blue costume having bullets and lasers shot at him. He's dodging and doing backflips with ease. I'm like, Ken, who is that? He told me, well, Spider-Man. I said, who is he? He said, a nerd that got superpowers. I'm like, oh. And my face lit up because I didn't think a nerd could be anything except a nerd. I'm like, nerds can actually be cool. So all I know was I started watching the whole animated series. Any comic book that came out, I read and stuff like that. I had to sneak behind my brother's back and read some of his comic books, but it was worth it.
Sure.
And I realized I wanted to be a hero too. But I never knew how I was going to go about doing it until I realized I love music. And when I realized that I was able to talk about topics that other people could relate to, or people felt, I said, this is how I can do it. So that's where a lot of that leadership role came into as well. So for future references, I'm going to keep that in mind and make it painstakingly known that you don't have to find inspiration from things that actually exist. I feel like fiction can also be as beneficial as fact or nonfiction.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of power in the imagination. I think even subconsciously it helps people process what's going on in the world. So there's a certain level of truth to it, whether it's factual truth, I guess, or some sort of some sort of like esoteric or metaphoric truth to it,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's definite power there. The underdogs of society, I suppose, that become superheroes, which for whatever reason, I think the vast majority of superheroes in comic books are the outcasts in their alter egos,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But then they all tend to build on this commonality of, well, actually, we are all outcasts, but we're all outcasts who are superheroes. So now we're all superheroes together and no longer outcasts among all other superheroes, you know? Uh,
Yes.
and and they build a support network and they build a way to relate with each other and communicate and have things in common where otherwise they felt alone and afraid and deserted.
Yes,
That
sir. Yes, sir.
that sort of ability to ask for help is what we put into a hashtag called Combine and Conquer. But you are actually you put in more than a game. I think one of the lines of the lyrics in there is giving life to vision. And I don't know if it's Game Notes or Illa's Gamer or who exactly, but somebody said give life to vision. And I think that ability is easier as a team. It's
It is.
easier with a support network and an outlet and a way to learn as even a mentor to how to channel the emotion and just sort of the raw vision into a finely tuned and honed product. So I guess on that note, for future nerdcore opportunities, as far as Geekster's concerned, let's talk a little bit about some resources, some websites, some marketing, some merchandise, future collaboration opportunities, whatever you want, man. This is your piece. If people want to find more about you, your career, your music, your merchandise, where do we go? What do we do?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Lawrence Luton, open parentheses, Geekster the Super Nerd, close parentheses. Find me on Instagram, Geekster the Super Nerd. I would say SoundCloud, Audio Mac, all streaming platforms, Geekster the Super Nerd. I'm also, now that you mentioned, I'm selling merchandise. I'm selling T-shirts, hoodies, V-necks. I'm selling coffee mugs, duffel bags, backpacks, tote bags, beanies. You can find that at nerdmusicapparel.myspreadshop.com. It's a discount going on, so I would say that to just hurry up and jump up on it because last time I checked, I think it lasts until like the 22nd of this month. I would say that I have a lot in store for the music. I'm going to be working on an album, well, two albums actually. One is for both of my cousins that are incarcerated for crimes that they did not commit. That album is going to be called Innocent But Living Guilty. I'm going to be working on a second album that is going to be called Tough Enough, and that is based off the video game Tough Enough, also known as Dead Dance. I'm going to be reaching out to different nerdcore artists such as Crazy 8 the Great, Hieroglyphics, Daddy Fat Snaps, Rustich. I'm also going to be working with two nerdcore producers, Arcade the Sage and Villainous Beats. So I have a lot planned for this year. So merchandise, two new albums, some features. I have a lot planned for this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say so. And we'll put up links to Nerd Music Apparel, your Facebook, your Instagram, and Spotify, obviously. We'll put links to there as well. So in the show, once this episode airs, people can click on that as well. That'll be up on Facebook, Survival Dad YT. That'll be up on Instagram, also Survival Dad YT. And then you'll be able to find those links as well in the show notes on Spotify and other podcasting stations. So people will be able to find that as well. But for the time being, Geek, I appreciate this, man. This was super cool to be able to go through some of this music and thought process and your perspective and your values. I really appreciate the opportunity. So again, thank you.
Yes, sir. The pleasure was all mine. Like I'm really glad I was able to do this today.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, and we'll have to jump on it again next time and get updates with you. It sounds like 2022 is going to be pretty busy, so maybe after that. But I look forward to the opportunity. We'll see what we can sort out.
Yes, sir. Oh yeah, anytime. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, so to all of our listeners out there, I appreciate you guys jumping in as well, and I'm sure Geek does. But again, if you're new to the show, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patronage. Without further ado, I am Porter. I am your host, and that was SDYT, the podcast.